Before you judge this story, understand this. Some families don't run on love. They run on guilt, debt, and control. This is one of those stories. The first time my mom told me I owed her, I was 12. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no soap opera music swelling in the background. It was just Tuesday. I was standing in the kitchen in my school uniform, staring at a bowl of cereal that had gone soggy because I'd been too nervous to eat. Mom was at the counter with a stack of overdue bills spread out like a tarot reading. She didn't look at me when she said it. "You know, Nina," she murmured, tapping a red stamped envelope with her nail, "I didn't have to keep you." I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. "You're lucky," she added, finally turning her head. Her expression was calm, almost conversational. Other women would have left. But I didn't. I stayed. I sacrificed. I raised you. Then she went back to the bills, like she'd just reminded me to brush my teeth. At 12, I didn't understand what that sentence really was. Now I do. It was the first payment request in a long line of payment requests. The beginning of a contract I never signed. And it's why, when she demanded half my salary every month at 28 years old, my stomach didn't just drop. It recognized the shape of the trap. I got my current job 8 months ago. It wasn't glamorous. I'm not saving lives or inventing cures. I work in operations for a mid-sized company, which means I spend a lot of my day fixing other people's mistakes with spreadsheets and polite emails. But it paid well. Better than anything I'd ever made before. It was the first time in my adult life I felt something close to air. I could pay my rent without checking my account 3 times. I could buy groceries without doing mental math in the aisle. I could put money into savings and not immediately pull it back out because something somewhere had exploded. I bought myself a couch. A real one, not the lumpy thrift store one I'd been dragging through my 20s like a punishment. And I made a mistake. I told my mom. I wasn't bragging. I wasn't rubbing it in. I was excited in the way people get when they think they're finally allowed to unclench. I called her on a Sunday afternoon while I was still sitting on the floor in front of my new couch, surrounded by cardboard and plastic wrap, my legs sore from assembling it. "Mom," I said, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt, "I got the promotion." There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "How much?" No congratulations. No pride. Just the question. I should have lied. Instead, I told her. Another pause. Then her voice softened in a way that should have sounded warm, but instead made my skin tighten. "Oh," she said. "So you're doing well now?" "Yeah," I replied. "Finally." "MMH," she hummed. "Good. Because we need to talk." 2 weeks later, she invited me over for dinner. Invite is a generous word. In my family, come for dinner was a summons. If you declined, it became evidence. If you went, it became leverage. I went anyway, because guilt is a language I'm fluent in. Her house looked the same as it always had. The same faded curtains. The same smell of old cooking oil and floral cleaner. The same family photos on the wall, all of them featuring her in the center like a saint in stained glass. When I walked in, she hugged me tightly, held on a little too long. "You look tired," she said, pulling back to examine me like I was a receipt she didn't trust. "Work," I said. She clicked her tongue sympathetically, the way people do when they want credit for empathy. Dinner was fine. That's the thing about my mother. When she wanted to be, she could be charming. Funny. Almost normal. She asked about my coworkers. She laughed at the right places. She poured me a glass of wine and told me I deserved to relax. And I felt myself start to soften, like an idiot. Then she cleared her throat. "Nina," she said, setting down her fork with deliberate care. "Now that you're making good money, it's time you start doing your part." The phrase made something in my chest tighten. My part? I repeated. She nodded, eyes steady, like she'd rehearsed this. You've been coasting, she continued. Living your little independent life. And that's fine. I let you do that. But I'm not young anymore. I sat back slightly. Okay. She leaned forward. I've given you everything. I raised you. I fed you. I put a roof over your head. I worked myself to the bone. I stared at her, fork frozen in my hand. You owe me, she said, simply. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My stepdad, Dan, shifted uncomfortably at the end of the table. He didn't speak. He never did. Dan is the kind of man who lives inside other people's decisions like a tenant who doesn't pay rent. Mom, I said carefully, what are you talking about? She smiled like I'd just asked something adorable. I'm talking about respect, she said. Gratitude. Responsibility. Then she reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table toward me. I unfolded it. It was a number. A monthly number. Written in her neat handwriting. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. Then my stomach turned. Half, I whispered, looking up. This is half my salary. She nodded like that was the most logical thing in the world. Every month, she said. Direct transfer. Same day you get paid. I blinked. Once. Twice. Mom, I said, my voice thin, no. Her expression didn't change at first. Then her eyes sharpened, like a blade being drawn. No, she repeated. I can't give you half my income, I said. I have rent. Bills. Savings. She waved a hand dismissively. You can manage. I'm not your ATM, I said before I could stop myself. Dan inhaled sharply, like he'd just heard a swear word at church. My mom's face shifted. Not into anger. Not yet. Into something colder. You know, she said slowly, I was wondering when you'd start acting like this. Like what? I asked, my pulse pounding. Selfish, she said, matter of fact. Like the world revolves around you. I stared at her. I'm selfish because I won't hand you half my paycheck? You're selfish because you're forgetting where you came from, she said, her voice rising. You think you're better than us now because you have a fancy job and a couch? It's not fancy, I said, stunned. It's my life. No, she snapped. It's the life I gave you. That sentence hit like a slap. I stared at her hands on the table. The same hands that used to braid my hair when I was little. The same hands that used to yank my arm too hard when she was mad. The same hands that would press a birthday gift into mine and then later remind me how much it cost. Dan cleared his throat softly. Marina, he said, cautious, maybe half is a bit. My mom didn't even look at him. Stay out of it. He fell silent instantly. She turned back to me. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. It's time you pay me back. Pay you back for raising me? I said, my voice breaking slightly. Yes, she said, calm again. For everything. I felt my throat tighten. Heat prickled behind my eyes, not because I was about to cry, but because my body was doing that old thing where it prepared for punishment. When I was your age, she continued, I didn't get to be selfish. I had responsibilities. I had a child. The emphasis on child felt like she was pointing at me in the past, dragging my 12-year-old self into the room to testify against me. And I didn't have anyone helping me, she said. No one sent me money. No one bought me couches. I did it alone. That's not true, I said quietly. Grandma helped you all the time. Her eyes flashed. Don't disrespect me. I'm not. You always do this, she snapped. You rewrite history to make me the villain. I swallowed. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm saying half my salary is insane. I'm your mother, she said, voice hard. You don't get to call me insane. I pushed the paper back across the table. My hands were trembling. I'm not doing this, I said. If you need help, we can talk about a reasonable amount. I can contribute to a bill. I can. No, she cut in sharply. I'm done with reasonable. Reasonable is what kept me poor while everyone else got ahead. Her gaze locked onto mine. You're going to send it, Nina. Or don't bother coming around here anymore. The threat landed with a familiar weight. Conditional love. Always. I stared at her, trying to breathe. You're serious, I whispered. Dead serious, she said. And if you try to embarrass me by telling people I'm demanding things, I will tell them the truth. That I raised an ungrateful daughter who thinks she can abandon her family. My fingers dug into my napkin until it tore. Dan's face was pale. He stared at his plate like he could disappear into it. I realized then that he wasn't shocked by her demand. He was shocked I was saying no. Because in our house, no wasn't a word you used with her. I stood up, chair scraping the floor. My mom's eyes narrowed. Sit down. No, I said, my voice shaking but louder now. I'm leaving. You are not walking out on me, she hissed. I grabbed my coat. Watch me. For a second, she looked like she might throw something. Then her face twisted into that expression I knew too well, the one that mixed rage with sorrow, the one that made outsiders think she was a wounded saint instead of a woman sharpening a knife. You think you can just leave? She said, voice trembling. After everything I've done? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I'd been leaving my whole life. I just hadn't locked the door behind me yet. As I reached for the doorknob, she spoke again, quieter. If you don't do this, she said, don't expect your brother to forgive you. My hand froze. Elay. Of course she'd bring him into it. I turned back slowly. Don't do that. She tilted her head, eyes glittering. Do what? Use him, I said, my voice raw. He's not a weapon. He's family, she snapped. And family pays family back. I stared at her, realizing something with nauseating clarity. This wasn't about money. Money was just the easiest way to measure obedience. I left anyway. I drove home with my hands clenched so tight around the steering wheel my knuckles hurt. When I got to my apartment, I sat on my new couch and stared at the wall for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Mom, I expect your first transfer on Friday. Don't disappoint me. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Because Friday was 2 days away. And for the first time in my adult life, I realized I wasn't scared of losing her. I was scared of what she'd do when she realized she couldn't control me anymore. Friday came faster than it should have. I woke up that morning with the kind of dread that settles in your stomach before you even open your eyes. My phone was on the nightstand, face down, like it was ashamed of itself. I didn't need to check it to know there would be messages waiting. There were 6. All from my mom. Mom, good morning. Mom, don't forget what we talked about. Mom, I raised you better than to ignore me. Mom, transfers usually hit by noon. Mom, I hope you're not planning to embarrass me. Mom, Nina? I sat up slowly, my heart thudding. I hadn't replied since the dinner. Not because I was plotting something dramatic, but because every time I tried to type, my hand started shaking. I kept hearing her voice in my head, calm and certain, like she already owned the outcome. I went to work anyway. The office felt unreal that day, like I was moving through a set built to resemble my life. My coworkers talked about weekend plans. Someone microwaved fish. The printer jammed. Meanwhile, my entire childhood was trying to collect interest. At 11:47 a.m., my paycheck hit my account. I stared at the notification longer than I should have. This was the moment she thought she'd won. At 12:03, my phone rang. Mom. I didn't answer. At 12:05, she called again. I declined. At 12:07, a text. Mom, I see the deposit. I'm waiting. I stood up, walked into the stairwell, and pressed my forehead against the cool concrete wall. I could still do it, I thought. I could send it. Half. Just to make the noise stop. Just to buy myself time. That's what I'd always done. Paid for silence. Paid for peace. My phone buzzed again. Mom, don't make me ask twice. Something in me snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. Like a thread finally pulled too tight. I texted back. I'm not sending anything. Mom, excuse me? We need to talk. This demand isn't okay. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Mom, you are being dramatic. I told you what's expected. You don't get to expect half my income. Mom, I absolutely do. I invested my life in you. There it was again. Investment. Return. Parenting isn't an investment. Mom, spoken like someone who never sacrificed anything. I closed my eyes. I've been helping you for years. You know that. Mom, helping? You call that helping? You think groceries and a few bills make us even? My chest tightened. Because that wasn't true. And she knew it. I went back to my desk, opened my banking app, and started scrolling. At first, I was just looking. Verifying. Making sure I wasn't imagining things. Then I started writing. A spreadsheet. New file. Blank. I titled it something neutral. Something safe. Family expenses. I told myself it was just for clarity. I started with the obvious. Utilities, 3 winters of covering the heating bill, just until things stabilize. Phone plan, hers and Eli's, still on my account. Groceries, weekly small runs that somehow always hit triple digits. Car repairs, emergencies that couldn't wait. Medical copays, because you're good with paperwork. Then I scrolled further back. College years. Early jobs. Cash app transfers labeled loan. Venmo requests marked urgent. ATM withdrawals I barely remembered making. The total kept climbing. My stomach went hollow. I wasn't keeping score. She had. She just didn't expect me to audit it. At 2:30 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mom. It was Eli. I answered immediately. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hi, he said, too quiet. Mom says you're mad at her. I closed my eyes. No, I said. I'm not mad at you. That's not what I asked, he replied, gently but firmly. He's always been smarter than she gives him credit for. I swallowed. She shouldn't be talking to you about this. She said if you don't help, we're screwed, he said. That you're choosing money over family. My chest burned. Eli, I said carefully, has she told you how much I've already been helping? There was a pause. No, he admitted. She just says you forgot where you came from. Of course she did. I didn't forget, I said softly. I remember everything. That's the problem. Another pause. She's really upset, he said. She keeps saying you owe her. I gripped the edge of my desk. You don't owe your parents for being born. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she says I will too, someday. That did it. The last fragile thread holding my guilt together snapped clean in two. I hung up and went straight back to the spreadsheet. This time, I didn't stop at totals. I added dates. Notes. Screenshots. Texts where she thanked me. Texts where she promised to pay me back. Texts where she pretended it was a gift when it suited her, and alone when it didn't. I worked through my lunch break. Through the afternoon. By the time I finished, my hands were numb. The final number stared back at me from the bottom of the sheet. It was more than a year of my current salary. More than half of what she was demanding now. More than she would ever acknowledge. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. This wasn't generosity. This was extraction. When I got home, there was a missed call from my mom and 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I opened my email. I attached the spreadsheet. Then, slowly, deliberately, I typed. I didn't insult her. I didn't accuse her. I didn't beg. I listed facts. Dates. Amounts. Totals. At the end, I wrote 1 paragraph. This is what I have already contributed. I will not be sending half my income. I am not a repayment plan. If you want a relationship with me, it will be without financial demands or threats. If you continue, I will step back. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I hit send. My phone rang less than 30 seconds later. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. Then the text started. Mom, how dare you? Mom, this is disgusting. Mom, you kept score against your own mother? Mom, you are cold. Mom, after everything I sacrificed. I sat on my couch, my new couch, and felt something strange settle over me. Not relief. Clarity. She wasn't shocked by the numbers. She was furious I'd taken away her narrative. At 9:18 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new message. Aunt Rosa. Aunt Rosa, your mother is in tears. I hope you're proud of yourself. I stared at the message. Then another. Aunt Rosa, family doesn't send invoices. I almost laughed. Because that was the point. Family shouldn't. And yet, somehow, I was the only one being punished for refusing to pay one. I turned my phone face down and sat in the silence, my heart racing, my chest tight. I knew what was coming next. She wouldn't retreat. She would escalate. And when she did, she wouldn't do it quietly. She didn't give me the courtesy of warning. I found out she'd escalated the same way I always had growing up, through other people. The first call came from Dan. I didn't answer. The second came from my aunt. I silenced it. The third came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered that one, because part of me is still 12 and afraid of missing something important. This is Nina, I said. Nina, a woman's voice replied, hesitant, this is Karen from your church. My stomach dropped. I'm calling because your mother is very concerned about you, she continued. She says you're under a lot of stress and making decisions that could hurt your family. I closed my eyes. She also mentioned, Karen went on, lowering her voice like she was delivering bad news, that there may be some financial misunderstandings. I just wanted to reach out and see if you're okay. There it was. The public concern. The soft humiliation disguised as care. I'm fine, I said tightly. And my finances are not a church matter. A pause. Well, Karen said gently, your mother is very upset. She feels abandoned. I thanked her for calling and hung up before my voice could crack. My hands were shaking. Within the hour, 2 more messages came in. One from a distant cousin I barely spoke to. Another from someone I'd gone to high school with, asking if everything was okay at home. She was painting me as unstable. As cruel. As the daughter who had turned her back on a struggling mother. That night, she showed up at my apartment. I didn't hear the knock at first. I heard the shouting. Nina, she yelled from the hallway. Open the door. My heart slammed into my ribs. I froze on the couch, my phone clutched in my hand. I know you're in there, she continued, her voice echoing off the walls. Don't you dare hide from me. I stood slowly and walked to the door, every step heavy. I didn't open it. We need to talk, she demanded. We already did, I said through the door. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You sent me a spreadsheet. Like I'm some stranger. Like I didn't bleed for you. That spreadsheet is my life, I said, my voice trembling despite my effort. It's years of help you refuse to acknowledge. You think numbers erase sacrifice? She snapped. You think money is all that matters? No, I said. You do. She banged her fist on the door. I am your mother. And I am your daughter, I shot back. Not your pension. Silence fell in the hallway. Then she spoke, quieter now. Deadlier. You would have nothing without me. The words hit like a familiar bruise. I leaned my forehead against the door, breathing hard. And you would have nothing to take from me if I hadn't survived you. Her breath hitched. Then anger flooded back in. You think you're so evolved, she sneered. Sitting on your little couch in your little apartment, judging me. I'm not judging you, I said. I'm refusing you. She scoffed. Same thing. No, I replied. Judging is what you're doing to me. Refusing is what I'm doing for myself. She went very still. You're choosing money over family, she said. I'm choosing freedom over fear, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. That was when the mask finally slipped. You owe me, she hissed. Every good thing in your life came from my suffering. That's not love, I said. That's ownership. She laughed, low and ugly. You were mine the moment you were born. Something in my chest cracked open. I was a child, I said, my voice breaking. Not a debt. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the hum of the building and my own breathing. Then she started crying. Not quietly. Not with dignity. Loud, heaving sobs that echoed down the hallway. You're killing me, she wailed. I gave up everything for you. My youth. My dreams. And this is how you repay me? I felt the old reflex surge up. The urge to open the door. To apologize. To make it stop. Instead, I stayed where I was. You didn't give up your life for me, I said, forcing the words out through the ache in my throat. You chose to have a child. And you chose to resent me for it. Her crying stopped abruptly. You ungrateful little. I'm done, I said, cutting her off. I'm not sending you money. I'm not explaining myself to your friends. And I'm not doing this again. You don't get to decide that, she snapped. I do, I said. Because this is my door. And my life. She stepped closer to the door. I could hear her breath. If you walk away from me, she said slowly, don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect family. Don't expect to see your brother. That was the moment. Not when she demanded the money. Not when she humiliated me. But when she threatened to erase me from my own family to maintain control. I felt something settle inside me, heavy and irreversible. Don't contact me again, I said. Her breath caught. What did you say? I'm going no contact, I repeated, my voice steady now. Until you can have a relationship without money, guilt, or threats, I'm done. She laughed, incredulous. You think you can just cut me off? Yes, I said. Watch me. Her voice turned shrill. You're heartless. No, I replied. I'm finished being owned. She stood there for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked down the hallway. Her footsteps were fast, furious. The building door slammed. I slid down against the door, my legs giving out beneath me. I didn't cry. I felt hollow. Like something vital had been ripped out and taken with her. My phone buzzed. A message from Eli. Eli, she's furious. She says you betrayed her. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Me, I didn't betray her. I stopped sacrificing myself. 3 dots appeared. Then, Eli, I think you're right. That was the first time anyone in my family had ever said that to me. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet, the echo of her words still ringing in my ears. You owe me. Maybe once, I'd believed her. But tonight, standing on the other side of my own locked door, I finally understood something she never would. I didn't owe her my life. I was reclaiming it. The silence afterward was the hardest part. Not the yelling. Not the threats. Not even the moment I said the words out loud. Don't contact me again. It was the quiet that came after, stretching out in ways my body didn't know how to measure. The first morning of no contact, I woke up before my alarm, heart racing like I'd missed something important. My phone was still face down on the nightstand. I didn't check it right away. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar surge of panic. It didn't come. Instead, there was something else. A dull ache. Grief without chaos. I blocked her number that afternoon. Then her email. Then her social media. Each click felt both brutal and merciful, like closing doors in a house that had been on fire for years. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a dramatic message explaining myself. I didn't owe her one more paragraph of justification. I owed myself peace. The backlash came anyway. Aunt Rosa stopped by my apartment unannounced 2 days later. I didn't open the door. She left a voicemail instead. You've humiliated your mother, she said. She can't sleep. She cries all the time. I hope you understand what you've done. I deleted it. Dan sent a text asking if we could talk things through like adults. I didn't reply. A cousin unfriended me. Someone subtweeted about kids who forget their roots. I let it all happen. Because something inside me had finally shifted from defending myself to protecting myself. Eli and I talked quietly, carefully. Not in big emotional bursts, but in small truths passed back and forth like fragile glass. She keeps saying you'll come around, he admitted one night. I won't, I said. I know, he replied. That was enough. I started sending him grocery money directly. Tuition help straight to the school. No explanations. No intermediaries. Mom noticed immediately. She tried once more. A new number. A single text. Mom, you think blocking me changes anything? I blocked that number too. And that was it. No final showdown. No apology. No closure wrapped in a bow. Just distance. At first, the guilt came in waves. Random moments. Standing in line at the grocery store. Folding laundry. Hearing a mother scold her child in public. The voice in my head would whisper, what kind of daughter does this? Then another voice, quieter but steadier, would answer. The kind who finally stops bleeding. I went back to therapy. I told my therapist everything, including the spreadsheet. She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, you didn't send her a receipt to punish her. You sent it to see the truth clearly. She was right. The receipt wasn't revenge. It was evidence. Evidence that love had been turned into a ledger long before I ever opened Excel. Months passed. My savings grew for the first time without shrinking in fear. I slept through the night. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I bought groceries without bracing for a crisis. I lived. Sometimes, I missed her. Or rather, I missed the mother I kept hoping she'd become. But hope isn't a strategy. And love that demands payment isn't love. It's ownership. On the 1-year anniversary of the dinner where she demanded half my salary, I opened the spreadsheet one last time. I looked at the total. Then I closed the file. I didn't delete it. I didn't need to. It had done its job. I locked my laptop, stood up, and sat on my couch, the same couch I'd once been made to feel guilty for owning. My life was quiet now. Not empty. Quiet. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. Because I finally understood something my mother never would. Parents don't get paid for raising their children. And children don't owe their lives as interest on love. I didn't send her the receipt to win. I sent it so I could walk away knowing exactly what I was leaving behind. And I never looked back. Some people think boundaries are punishment. They're not. They're what's left when hope finally runs out.